Time to buckle up, super friends, because in today's video, we're going for a ride. Hello, super friends, and welcome back to another episode of Superhero Saturday, where we talk about the arts of superheroes, storytelling, and so much more. My name is Annie, and I'm a bit of a gearhead myself, so whenever I see a favorite superhero pull up in a super sweet ride, I am totally on board. Whether it's a tricked out classic car like Lola from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or a souped up stealth vehicle like the Batmobile, or a completely out of this world contraption like the Watchtower, a vehicle can be a vital part of a superhero or a supervillain's toolkit. Getting from point A to point B fast enough to save the day is essential, and doing it in style is just awesome. Now, super vehicles don't necessarily just have to do with transportation either. They can also do a whole range of other things to help with the superhero or supervillain's daily activities. For example, a hero's guy in the chair might have a mobile surveillance unit where he can get in there and figure out all of the stuff that's going on even when they're not at home at the HQ. A different type of vehicle might be more oriented toward rescue operations, so for evacuating people out of a dangerous situation, or even administering first aid and having supplies on hand to take care of people who are injured. And other times, a vehicle might be so armored and powerful that it can be used as a shield or even a sanctuary for people who are getting attacked by supervillains and being exploded. Something that's strong enough to withstand enemy fire and could mean the difference between winning and losing a battle with a supervillain. So if you're interested in creating some kind of vehicle for your superheroes or supervillains, we're going to talk about the different types of vehicles today, specifically 5 different categories of super vehicles, and what you can kind of consider when you're creating that design that they're going to drive around the city in. So start your engines, super friends, and let's get into it. The first type of super transportation on our list is non-motored or small type transportation methods. This could be something like rollerblades, a bicycle, or skates, something that gets the character from point A to point B, but doesn't take up a lot of space. Maybe could fit into the trunk of a car or something like that. This category kind of contains everything that's not as big as a car, but can definitely move someone from one place to another. Now you can go the totally traditional route depending on what your character is all about. If they're maybe a relatively lower class middle school student or something like that, roller skates might be a really cool idea because it's something affordable that they could do and still get around in, but maybe still keep them within a radius that will get them home in time for curfew. This category could also include more high-tech, more fancy type of things, something similar to like Iron Man's suit, which is a very high-tech thing, but it's not exactly a car. So it more fits into the kind of clothing or armor category, but does transport him around to save the day. The second type of super vehicles is just mostly normal car-type automobiles that you might see on the road. This includes cars, trucks, motorcycles, mopeds, that kind of thing. A lot of times heroes have vehicles that are stealthy by just going undercover and driving them around, but not being so conspicuous enough that people might see it and say, oh, that's the supercar. Now, although these vehicles look normal on the outside, they don't necessarily have to be normal on the inside. For example, if it is like a car like Lola from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it looks like an ordinary classic car. But when you get in and power it up, you find all sorts of different things that you weren't really expecting from the 1960s. Now, personally, this is probably my favorite type of super vehicle just because I think they're really cool and because I like cars. So every superhero that I've created so far has a supercar kind of like this in the story. For example, Haley Hendricks from my first book, Stronger, has a 1969 Barracuda that's painted nice and orange and black like Oregon State University. Go Beavs. Now hers isn't exactly tricked out yet in that story with anything very super heroic, except a fire extinguisher and a first aid kit and all sorts of emergency equipment that is normal for someone who maybe is a little bit of a doomsday prepper, but not that much out of the ordinary. But I love the idea of someday maybe kitting her out with some really cool technology equipment to help with all sorts of superheroing on Team Cannonball Cooper, because she'll look awfully cool doing it. The third type of super vehicle is something that has a frame that is mostly ordinary, but is clearly a superhero vehicle. By this, I'm talking about something like the Turtle Van, where it's basically an ordinary VW bus to begin with, but you can see from the outside it's all colored and kitted out with shells and turtle motifs and colors, and it's got all sorts of things on top of it that are clearly there to help the turtles, you know, save the day. The Batmobile also falls into this category because most of the time, depending on which iteration you're talking about, it definitely does not look like a normal car on the outside. It looks like a tank, or it looks like a military vehicle or something like that, like super stylized. It's clearly something that you would not find at a used car lot. But on the other hand, it is also technically a car. These vehicles might also be vans or trucks or really cool looking motorcycles, but in their essential form, they are a typical automobile, and that's why they fall into this category, even if it's just a sticker on the side that has your hero's emblem on it. The fourth category of super vehicles is mostly normal, non-automobiles. And by this, I'm talking about things like tanks or airplanes or aircraft carriers, boats and submarines and stuff like that. Things that do exist relatively commonly in the normal everyday world, but ordinary people just don't have these types of vehicles usually sitting in their backyards. The Bat franchise has all sorts of iterations on this, from like the bat-copter to the bat glider to all sorts of things with the word bat in front of it. This also includes things like the helicarrier, which is just kind of barely in this category because it does originally look like an aircraft carrier. It just flies. So like it's sort of in the military of the Marvel universe, but also not, and is also like it's kind of a super version of things in this category. The fifth and final category of super vehicles is a completely abnormal modes of transportation that are not already in one of these other categories. This includes things like spaceships or UFOs or multi-dimensional transportation units, or perhaps teleporter pads. These are definitely things that aren't something that we see relatively every day. These are things that either come into the universe from alien races or completely undiscovered civilizations, or completely new vehicles that are invented or created by the super characters themselves. I'm also putting powers like teleportation or other kinds of like getting from one place to another with biological or superpowered means, because these are methods of transportation, but they're not exactly vehicles, so I wanted to make sure I caught all of those things in these categories. This category is kind of a catch-all for all of those other weird things that you can think about, so if you find any really cool examples that don't fall into any of the other categories, this is where it lands. Okay, with all of those 5 categories in mind, let's talk about what it means when you're designing a super vehicle or a super mode of transportation for your characters. Because there are a few things that you should consider before just randomly picking an invisible jet for your character. The first thing to ask is, how practical is this vehicle for your superhero's endeavors? And by this, I mean, what are they going to use this vehicle for? If your super character is a hero type and they want to do a lot of rescue operations, like for example, rescuing people from some kind of natural disaster, if they're just riding into a hurricane on a moped, that might not work very well. On the other hand, if they're a character that does a lot of space travel, again, you're not gonna want to slap some rollerblades on it without considering maybe the rollerblades activate some kind of light speed warp gate or something that gets them to where they need to go. And this question also is not supposed to be designed as a deal breaker for any cool idea that you have. It's just something to consider when you're making it, because even if your character really needs something that transports lots of people in large distances really quickly, that doesn't mean they don't have to want a really cool coupe sports car from the 1970s. If they really want it and it's kind of part of their character, then maybe they, you know, go the extra mile just so they can use it, and then when they have to, they go ahead and use some other type of vehicle as well. Your character can totally love their own little custom vehicle in spite of its impracticality. Just think about it when you're putting it into the story. You'll also want to think about what kind of missions this vehicle might be called into action for. So for example, if it is a stealth vehicle, what type of stealth vehicle is it? Is it an undercover type of vehicle, like something that can blend into the crowd, like some kind of minivan or something like that? Or is it something that is designed to avoid radar or something some more serious like that? There are different ways you can go about accomplishing this mission, so you might want to consider the different applications of a super vehicle to see what kind of thing you can come up with that will either best or more appropriately fit those purposes. The next thing to consider, and I think that a lot of people kind of skip over or gloss over this, and you can if you really want to, but I like it when you consider it, is what does it take to maintain and operate this type of vehicle? If your character is some kind of teenager with only his allowance in his pocket, then it might be kind of ridiculous to give that character some kind of jet-powered rocket skates that need rocket fuel that's very expensive to go anywhere. Although, to be honest, regular gasoline is very expensive to go anywhere right now, but that's beside the point. There's also things to consider like the maintenance of parts, keeping up with oil changes and things like that. When you have different types of vehicles, you're gonna wanna consider what goes into keeping that vehicle in operating order on a regular basis, because that could factor into maybe an action sequence or some kind of character development, or even just create some kind of setting for your character and for the dialogue and the plot to happen. Because I've never once seen Bruce Wayne change the oil on the Batmobile, so is that Alfred's job or what? Another thing along this lines to consider is where does this vehicle live when it's not being in use? So where is the Batcave that houses all of the different types of vehicles? Where does your character put the car, park it, when they're not going around either saving the day or taking over the world? If your character has unlimited resources and money, then it might be easy enough to just like stick it in the headquarters and polish it up and call it a day. But it might be another thing to consider, like if, for example, you have some type of aircraft carrier type waterborne thing, where does it dock? Where does it move around the world? What also could be stored on something that's that big that could also serve as storage as well as a super vehicle itself? The last thing that I really like to consider when designing a super vehicle is how well does this vehicle stand up in a fight, especially a really intense fight. If it's something like a tank, it might be easy enough to, you know, just put it through the wash and get all the ashes off of it and then it looks brand new. Or if it's something more delicate, like maybe a classic car or a moped, and it, you know, a belt comes loose or something like that, what is it going to take for the character to repair that and get it back on the road? If it's hard to replace, your character probably wants to take good care of it. You might want to stash it somewhere outside of the range of the immediate fight scene to keep it from getting in the line of fire. Or if it's really durable, then maybe your character wants to use it as a shield or someplace to stash victims so that they don't get hurt anymore. These are all things to consider not only in the design of your super vehicle, but also in the application in the plot and the story as you develop it, so that you can get a little bit more interesting details out of even just the B plot or C plot of this super vehicle. So super friends, what are your favorite super vehicles that you've seen in the superhero fiction genre? Have you created a type of super vehicle that you really enjoyed making and is really cool for your character? Or do you have an idea for something that you want to share? Go ahead and pop those down in the comments below and we'll continue the conversation there. I really hope you guys got something useful out of this video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more superheroic and storytelling content. And if you want to check out my own super vehicles in action, you can find my superhero stories at our website at www.fearless9.com. Thanks again for watching, super friends, and we'll see you next time.